Yeah, I have a microphone now. Yay! Kim here with my reading wrap-up. August is over. Summer is so almost out the door. Summer is leaving. Very excited about that. It is a new month, so we're gonna tell you about everything I read last month. That's what we do. I only read 3 books in August, which is really just so perfectly a-okay for me because I was busy doing a lot of stuff. I'm kind of surprised I was able to get through 3 books. That's a victory. It doesn't really matter. You can read as much or as little as you want. It's life, it's books, it's Hakuna Matata, whatever. If this is your first time here, welcome to me and my books. If you like books, maybe subscribe. Cool. Quick disclaimer, I came up with my own weird book reviewing system, so I do points and weird things, and you can learn all about that right there. On to the books. The first book I read in August was Dragon's Future by Kandi J. Wyatt. If you couldn't guess, this book is about dragons. This is a fantasy novel about dragons and dragon riders and the traditions being questioned and rival riders showing up and, you know, fantasy dragon fun. In theory. That's what it's supposed to be. I didn't really like it. I thought it tried too hard to be an epic fantasy novel and just fell flat because it was trying to do all these sorts of things that it should be doing, and it just didn't make it. It just lacked the sort of magical feeling that fantasy novels have because it tried too hard to be a fantasy novel. I did a full review on this book that you can check out right there if you feel so inclined. I rated this an 11 out of 20 on my weird rating scale, which I feel really bad about, but it is what it is. Dragon's Future by Kandi J. Wyatt. Not super impressed by it, which is a shame because there's actually a pretty good story in here. It's just clouded over by all of the like writery bits. The next thing I read in August was Trigger Warning by Neil Gaiman. I finally finished Trigger Warning. I have been working on this book. I finally looked it up on Goodreads and I started this book in November of last year. So it literally took me almost a year to read this entire book. It's fine though, I read it and that's great. This is a short story collection by Neil Gaiman and he's fantastic and wonderful and the man can do no wrong for me. But because it was a short story collection, I was able to just read it little by little here and there, one story at a time, whenever. I finally sat down and finished the last bit of it in August. And I'm so glad I did because I absolutely loved it, just like I knew I would. Dark, twisted sort of things. There's a little fantasy, a little bit of urban fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi even, just like so great, just so great, so wonderful. I love Neil Gaiman. I will always love Neil Gaiman. He is probably my most favorite living author right now, if I'm honest. I think so. I think I can actually like 100% say that almost. I mean, it's really hard to narrow down your favorite author, but this guy is just love him. There are 3 stories I want to touch on in this wrap up. One of them is the Doctor Who story. I really liked it. I was a little disappointed that it was a Matt Smith, Amy Pond story because it's not my favorite duo from the show. It just was great, like Doctor Who sort of storytelling, but also just Neil Gaiman wonderfulness, and so I really enjoyed that. There's also a short story that's a companion piece to American Gods, which the TV show is out for right now. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's fantastic. I really enjoyed hearing a little nugget of a story about Shadow and kind of what happens after and things like that, and it was really cool and I really enjoyed that. It was nice to see an old character that I read about years and years and years ago. It was just a nice little nostalgic wonderful thing that happened that I really liked. And the last story I want to talk about is one about a man who is starting to forget things. He's struggling the entire story to remember the name of the author who wrote Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury, of course, who is like just a phenomenal writer. There was a little passage in the story towards the end that literally drove me to tears because he was talking about how powerful it can be to be a writer and how important it is to be a writer and how much your words matter. It really moved me and really hit home and just like grabbed right at my heart. And as long as your words, which are people, which are days, which are my life, as long as your words survive, then you lived and you mattered and you changed the world. That just inspired me and empowered me in a way that I'm not sure I can even put words to, which says a lot about my writing skill, but it really motivated me to get back to my own writing, which is so freaking important. It really did bring tears to my eyes and really inspired me to get back to my own writing, which I have now done, which is great and fantastic and wonderful and exciting. And I will always love Neil Gaiman for that because he can light the fire in me in a way that very few authors can. I feel like I will be eternally grateful to Neil Gaiman for never failing to light my own writing fire. Neil Gaiman, if you happen to ever stumble upon one of my silly little videos, from all of my heart, thank you. I rated this a 17 out of 20 on my rating scale. That's like 5 stars on Goodreads. Like it's a big deal and I really loved it and it was so good. It was so good. The last book I read in August, The Miserable Mill, the 4th book in the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I do really love this book series, but unfortunately I feel like I am reading them a little too close together because they're starting to feel predictable is the wrong word because they're for very young readers, and so of course they're going to be predictable to someone who pretends to be a grown-up. They've lost that little bit of charm for me, and I think it's because I'm reading them too close together. The story was still good, and the characters are still good, and I still enjoyed the read and was entertained by it, but I think I'm going to back off for a little bit until I continue with the next one. I also don't have the next book, so that was convenient. This series is about the Baudelaire orphans, and they keep ending up in the presence of Count Olaf, who is trying to steal their fortune, and he's terrible and horrible and nothing good happens to these poor kids, but they're very smart and very resourceful and just very clever, and so they squeak out of things and they have to take on the grown-ups very often, and I just love that. And I love the writing style of this series. It's so funny and so charming and so witty. The writing style is very unique and very stylized, and that's one of my favorite things when that's done right in a book, because it just really makes it stand out and really makes it fun and entertaining. I rated this a 15 out of 20 just because I think it was more of the time that I read it. It was a little too close to the others that I'm starting to kind of feel like it's the same story, but it's still a fun read, and I'm still going to continue the series. I'm just going to wait a few months. Those are all the books I read in August. I'm pleased with myself. Like I said, I was very busy with work stuff, so I didn't have a ton of time for recreational reading, but I got a little bit of it done anyway, and that's great. On to the next book, I guess. Feel free to share this video with other book nerds. Consider subscribing to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. I talk about reading the books and writing the books. It's kind of fun here. That's neat.